This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with a winemaker, Melissa Burr. How are you today, Melissa?
Doing really well, thank you.
Now, you are here in Toronto with the kind of Oregon Wine Fair, where we saw 45 Oregon producers pouring yesterday and the day before for both sommelier and, I guess, the general public. Now, you are the winemaker at Stoller and have been there for quite some time. However, in doing some reading, I realized that you originally studied to be a naturopathic doctor. How does one get from being a naturopathic doctor, or at least the wishes to be that, to becoming winemaker at Stoller?
Well, most people in the wine industry, especially in the United States, specifically in Oregon, are refugees to the wine industry because we're going on 52 years of grape growing in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. So if you think about that, it's not even really a full lifetime. So people come from all sorts of backgrounds. And myself personally, I'm from Oregon, grew up there, was going to do a host of different things, from work in the ski industry, which I did for several years, to education, then maybe to some tourism and travel related stuff. Took a lot of time off between school, and then during the interim got very interested, and still am, and very passionate about food, and about specifically organic food and then natural types of healing, whether it's herbology or through food as medicine. So with that kind of interest, I just kind of took me down the path of looking into naturopathic medicine, and I'm geared towards science in general. So I went to Portland State University in the mid-90s, kind of late mid-90s, and got my bachelor's of science to go into that field. Mm-hmm. And then during that time, the Oregon industry has been and it was growing and still is to date, but noticing wine in general, just not just Oregon, but becoming fascinated with wine as a product and a category, and took that interest and decided, instead of getting into graduate school right after finishing my bachelor's degree, I would go ahead and be an intern at a winery in Oregon for a harvest. So I did that in 2001 at a winery called Cooper Mountain, and was there for a couple of years.
That's Beaverton, right?
Beaverton,
yes,
on the outskirts of Portland. They have an organic focus in their vineyards as well as biodynamic, and I was very drawn to that. So that's kind of what propelled me into the industry, literally, because after that vintage, I stayed on there for several years, took more courses at Oregon State University, a lot of seminars, and became the winemaker for Stoller in 2003.
Now, I believe that your mother was one of the deciding factors. Was it your mother or your mother-in-law was one of the deciding factors? Because one of those two mentioned that they thought you would make a much better winemaker than a doctor.
That is true. That's a good memory from that.
I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not.
Yeah, I didn't know either. And of course, that's from a mother-in-law, so you're double not sure if it's a compliment. But the whole relation there was, she had purchased a property just shortly before that time period in the Columbia Gorge. She's got a 300-acre piece of property in White Salmon, Washington, that has a vineyard, 12-acre vineyard that's quite historic in Washington. So it's a Columbia Gorge AVA.
Yes, yeah.
It's about an hour and a half east of Portland area in Oregon. Right. So that, having her have a vineyard, be fairly new, and then as a family getting into wine, that kind of all tied together. And she made that observation, probably because I can drink a lot more wine than the average person and still sometimes have a conversation after. So that was what led to that. But
so it was kind of a team effort, because your husband, he got into the viticulture side of stuff, and you got into the enology, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, again, that's exactly it, and it's a great memory. So my husband, Simon, and I have been together for almost 20 years now, and so we've gone through different career changes and lifestyle focuses together. So this was what we did at that time when I got the internship and kind of fell in love with the wine side of things. He grew up from a farming background with horticulture and took some horticulture classes as well. So he decided to focus his efforts in vineyards, and worked for a large vineyard management company in Oregon for almost 5 years before starting his own company in 2007 for vineyard management.
Right. Now, you've been in, I guess, the wine world of Oregon for quite some time now. What would you say the most interesting changes are that you've seen take place throughout that period you've been involved?
There's been a lot of changes, and I think interesting and inspiring, kind of hand in hand, is really the growth of Oregon as a wine industry, kind of collectively and as a whole. There's so much happening in Oregon. There's a lot of energy, a lot of people coming to Oregon now specifically for wine and wine tourism and wine tasting, and people across the United States, and it seems like here in Toronto, have interest as well, which is amazing in Oregon wines. And it's been there all along, but it's exponentially has grown, especially I would say the past 3 to 5 years.
Right.
And it's inspiring to see, because again, like Oregon, it's a relatively young grape growing region. It's 50 years, but these people that came, the pioneers, these passionate people that had the vision for Oregon being a world-class place to grow these cool climate varieties like Pinot Noir, started it. And I think it's just neat to see kind of the grassroots effort and the diligence that people have put in time-wise into the vineyards and the wines to make Oregon kind of where it is today. And the way I see Oregon in the scope of things in the world is a very small wine growing region in terms of quantity. I mean, we're a drop in the bucket for the U.S. wines that are produced.
Very much so.
I think it's like 2% of wines we make compared to the amount of volume from California. And so that's, we're small, but it's so specific. I mean, it's a place where you have a lot of diversity of growing opportunities, but specifically I'll speak right now to the Willamette Valley, which is where in Oregon about 90% of the wine grapes are being grown and produced. And in the Willamette Valley, most of it is considered a cool climate. So you have the temperatures that will ripen these varietals, as well as the soils. We have 3 main soil types that define the region for grape growing. And I think the combination of those two things, along with this kind of passionate diligence of these pioneers and people that have come in after, have come to a culmination of making a really special, small, artisan wine growing region.
Now, people are definitely familiar with Pinot Noir coming out of Oregon, because Pinot Noir is the vast majority of the production there, and to a lesser extent Chardonnay, and of course we have Pinot Gris in the mix. But you also experiment with some other varietals as well.
We do, specifically at Stoller Family Estate, as well as across the state of Oregon. And when you look at Oregon as a whole wine growing region, if we go to southern Oregon, it's a lot more Mediterranean climate there, so there's more varietals being produced in southern Oregon, some bigger reds and some beautiful Syrahs, and a really incredible place to grow grapes. And then the other part of Oregon that I think people tend to almost forget about is Walla Walla.
Of course.
That growing region spans both Oregon and Washington, but the wines coming out of Walla Walla are world-class, outstanding wines. So there's diversity there. But going back to the varietals, we'll talk about Stoller Family Estate. We have the majority of our vineyard planted to Pinot Noir, and then second up is our Chardonnay, which is quite substantial for Oregon. We've got 60 acres of Chardonnay planted. And then the other varietals that we have an acre of Tempranillo, and we have an acre of Syrah, and a 2.5 acre planting of Riesling. So there's this experimental kind of focus with the reds, the Tempranillo and the Syrah, and then having Riesling, it was a world-class grape there at the property, is a great fit. So
now, as a winemaker, where would you say you took your inspiration from?
I think as my inspiration, it keeps changing, but it's come from a lot of the colleagues in Oregon that have been adamantly working vintage after vintage to make these wines and keep improving their winemaking skills. I think one person that's been a great mentor for me and a role model is Lynn Penerash, because of her accolades and her years of experience and her flexibility, as well as her passion and intelligence in making wines, and just really neat to follow what she's done. And then looking at the great wines of the world, I'm not trying to compare my wines to others, but always inspired by people like multi-generational families in Burgundy, or like I said, an Oregon pioneer. That's really what has inspired me. And then I think just to keep the momentum moving forward, the people, the lifestyle, the collaboration, the world of wine with people is inspiring. So kind of continues to be evolving as a career. And then again, like just the changing dynamics of the wine culture around the world. It's really fascinating.
Excellent. Well, we very much enjoyed tasting your wines, both on Monday. A lot of my friends tasted them yesterday, and I had a chance to taste some today. Thank you very much for joining us here in Toronto. Hopefully you will be a regular visitor now, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me and taking the time. And it's really incredible to see Oregon represented up here in Toronto this week. And I think it's a neat partnership here.
Super.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks.